Welcome to A Ride on the Outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
We're back. It's another week. It's the beginning of August. It's the 1-year anniversary of the MMA Outsiders. I am Zain Bando. To my left is Tom Albano, and I'm excited once again for yet another episode. And of course, we have a jam-packed show. So Tom, I'm excited to get right into it. A lot of fight news, and of course, a lot of recapping that we have to do to close out what is a crazy month of July. Before we go ahead and do that, though, be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to share the show across all of our social media platforms, including at MMA Outsiders ETV, of course, at ETV Network, which is the home of the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. And then, of course, you could also follow me at SamBando99. I'm a staff writer over at bjpen.com. And then, of course, to my left is Tom Albano. He's a contributor for Fansided MMA. And obviously, you can find his work over at the PFL website, as his workload will be up and at him once again this week as the PFL playoffs are set to take shape. So that'll be very exciting.
Yeah, so we got a lot that we got to get right into. We're going to roll right into it. First of all, Zain, we're actually recording this episode, and this episode is airing. It is literally 1 year to the date of our pilot episode, of our episode 0. So big celebration feels here this week. And yeah, it's pretty weird how quickly a year went. It feels like just yesterday that we were talking about Amanda Nunes regaining her title and Brandon Moreno winning the interim championship. And that was 277. And
that is wild. And come to think of it too, it's nearly a year to the day. We just missed it by a day. It's nearly a year to the day that I started with bjpen.com, because I officially started on August 1st, 2022. We're recording this on August 2nd, 2023. This will air August 3rd. So two pretty crazy milestones, 1 year of the show and 1 year at my new outlet. So it's kind of interesting when you put it in that perspective.
Certainly. All right. A lot we got to talk about. We have 3 different cards we have to preview. Well, 3 cards, but we're going to talk about Diaz Paul. We're going to talk about, as you mentioned, the PFL playoffs, which I'll be covering. The featherweight semifinals and light heavyweight semifinals take place on Friday, August 4th in good old San Antonio, Texas. And then the next day, as Diaz and Paul are squaring off in the boxing ring, the UFC Octagon goes over to Nashville for the first time since March of 2019. When Stephen Wonderboy Thompson got knocked out by Anthony Pettis. So we'll preview all of that. Obviously, the UFC Nashville main event this time around is going to be Cory Sandhagen, Rob Font, short notice fight from Mr. Font. We have some news elements. A lot of PFL stuff to talk about. Donn Davis making a tease on the platform formerly known as Twitter, which is now known as X.
Which is now known as X, and also is calling tweets, posts, and likes favorites all of a sudden. What are we doing?
Thanks, Elon. But yeah, Donn Davis making a little tease. Todd Atkins making a little report. Amanda Serrano, big breaking news for those of you who were probably sleeping on the other side of the world, or you went to bed early here on the East Coast of the U.S. Amanda Serrano has now joined the Professional Fighters League in the PFL's pay-per-view Superfight division. We'll talk all about that as it looks more and more inevitable. The PFL will be making a very big purchase at some point during the course of this month. Meanwhile, Zain, in the Octagon, we're now 5 weeks out from UFC 293, and we still have no main event.
No, we don't, and this is a story that you and I have been following for weeks, ever since the date was booked. I guess you could say maybe about 6 or 7 weeks ago, and yet almost every other day you and I are still scratching our heads, asking ourselves what the heck is going on with this Sydney, Australia card, which is looking more and more non-existent by the day. But there you go.
and then of course, we got to get through all of last weekend, where we had Terence Crawford putting on the most surprising kind of fight where it was an absolute one-sided beatdown of Errol Spence Jr. UFC 291, Justin Gaethje, as they talked about on the broadcast, 11 months, almost just under a year to the day that Leon Edwards pulls off the head kick shocker. We have another head kick shocker in Salt Lake City. And then a controversial Pereira Blachowicz decision. Tony Ferguson, I don't know what more I can say. I'll save that for later. And then the Bellator Rising card, which, I mean, if there was an event that could have gone more wrong for Bellator at a time where they didn't need it.
Right, and when you have one of your golden boys go down, we're going to get into more of what that all means. That's not a bad look, especially in an organization where said fighter doesn't usually compete. So,
for sure. All right, but like last week, and I think this might be the format we do from now on. We're going to start with our previews. Let's jump right into the big fight this weekend. Yes, it kind of pains me a little bit to say that this is the biggest fight of this weekend, but you know what? Somehow Jake Paul and I are connected together somehow because we're both PFL affiliated. So you know what? I'm all for it. Nate Diaz, Jake Paul. Let's go.
Yeah, no surprise with your reaction there. I hate to say this, I would have not said this a year ago, but I'm gonna say it now. I'm genuinely very excited to see this fight, to see how this fight is gonna play out. I will say this: there has not been much promotion for this card, but the promotion that there has been, I think, is getting people a lot more excited. And then you add the element of Ariel Helwani joining the broadcasting side on DAZN. Him taking the MMA hour on the road, kind of like a MMA against the world kind of mentality. If you look at it from a Diaz perspective, I think you're going to see a lot of crossover in this fight. A lot of people who don't like combat sports are going to watch this. The MMA hardcores are going to watch this. The Jake Paul haters will see it. The boxing purists will hate on it, but will probably still watch it somehow. And at the end of the day, I think the biggest winner in this fight are the fans, because no matter what, if you miss this fight or if you see it as it happens, someone's going to have a reaction. And I just think stylistically, this fight's awesome. Both of these guys are brawlers. Both of these guys are going to go in there, sit in the center of the ring, and just start trading. Nate Diaz isn't going to care. I think he's going to try to viciously hurt Jake Paul for the first time. We haven't really seen Jake Paul get wobbled whatsoever. Even against Anderson Silva, he wasn't in too much danger. The Tommy Fury fight, you could say what you want about that, but Tommy Fury didn't give Jake Paul the test that I thought he would. This is going to be a real boxing match. This is going to be a real scrap, and I don't see this going the full distance, and I actually see someone getting finished, and I'm tempted to pick Nate Diaz, but something just tells me that Jake Paul's genius, and I hate to dig him, but I have to do it. His genius handpicking of these fights is what is making his career a reality. And something tells me this train's gonna keep rolling.
Man, let's be real about something. The reason it was genius before was because his opponent in the boxing ring were another YouTuber, Nate Robinson, which I will still never get over the sight of seeing Nate Robinson flat on his face in the boxing ring as Snoop Dogg is on commentary. And Snoop Dogg is basically sitting there on commentary just like, where is it?
Oh my God!
And then he got Ben Askren, which Ben Askren never. The fact that Ben Askren, the only time I ever saw Ben Askren strike in the fights that I actually watched was that last one where he fought with Maya, which was a battle of grapplers, by the way. Tyron Woodley, who is a wrestling expert, even though he was a welterweight champion. And that was twice where he fought Tyron Woodley. And then Anderson Silva's old, and basically he was just happy to get paid. So here's my thing, Nate. Zan. Nate, I think, is I don't think he's gonna go out right away and just start boxing.
Really?
I think Nate's gonna play with him for the first couple of rounds.
Really?
I
That's
think
very interesting.
he's gonna try to do the Jedi mind tricks.
So if you're saying he's going to play with them, does this mean that in the middle of the fight we're going to get a classic Nate Diaz moment where he attempts to do something illegal, pull off his boxing glove, and attempt to give Jake Paul the finger in the middle of the ring?
I wouldn't be surprised, Zan. I wouldn't be surprised if this fight ended because Nate takes off his boxing glove in the middle of the ring and just gives the stock slap to Jake.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, I think it's actually going to be a very slow kind of start. I think you're going to see. It's a 10-round fight now. It was originally booked for 8, but I think they upped it to 10 last month. So
yep, that sounds right.
So I think what's going to happen is the first round, maybe 2, you're going to see a little feeling out process. You're going to see Nate Diaz play the Diaz mind games with Jake Paul. And then I think round 3 is where he's going to pick it up and try to get the finish of Jake. But I will say this, Zan, considering what you said about Jake Paul and his genius selection of opponents, I think that Nate Diaz is the best opportunity that certain fans in this combat sports world have seeing Jake Paul get knocked out. You know what? I'm gonna go on that. I'm gonna say Diaz is going. I mean, Diaz still has it. We saw him against Tony Ferguson. Now, granted, whatever you want to say about Tony Ferguson is Tony Ferguson, and I'll have a lot to say when we get to that point with UFC 291. But
exactly,
you know what? He was holding his own against Leon somewhat, and even though Leon won all 4 of the first 4 rounds when he and Nate Diaz fought, we saw in the 5th round Nate all of a sudden surprised and nearly get a finish with Leon in that fight. So you know what? I could see it. I could see Nate Diaz getting a finish. I'm gonna go round 8 finish for Nate Diaz.
Wow. So you're saying that even though you have the relationship that you do with the professional fighters, you are picking you are picking against the originator of the PFL Superfight division this weekend. Oh, it's Texas.
No, wait. Now, wait a minute, San. You asked me for my professional opinion. You asked me for my professional fighting opinion. So my professional opinion is Nate Diaz gets the win. Now, that being said, if Jake Paul wins, it's not going to feel as terrible considering we're both PFL affiliated. But you know what? I mean, San, here's my question, because now a report just came out today where it's Jake Paul's agent, and he's being a little teased. Saying, if Jake loses this fight, he might hang him up. Do you really see that happening?
No, of course not. I mean the last thing. The last thing that Team Most Valuable Promotions could have is their biggest star, the guy that literally built Team MVP, retire off of the biggest fight name draw wise that he'll ever compete against at this very moment in time. No, it's a mistake for him to consider retirement. Of course. I mean, I don't understand how that thought process remotely makes sense. It's not like, he won his first fight against Nate Robinson, or actually it was technically Anson Gibb, but his first real boxing match, if you want to call it that, against Nate Robinson. It's not like he won his first fight and lost 5 in a row. He's been on a decent run so far in his very short but very illustrious boxing career. It's an absolute mistake.
I mean, that being said, I do think it is a little damaging if he takes a loss, but I think somebody out there will still manage to take a fight with him, even if it's not as illustrious as an opponent like Nate Diaz. Plus, as we talked about this little joke connection of me, him, and the PFL, but you know what? He still has the PFL, who's not to say in 2024 the PFL books him for one of their 2 pay-per-views, for their one pay-per-view, and then depending on how they grow it, a second pay-per-view. Who's not to say Jake Paul doesn't get booked as the main event or a co-main event and ends up, getting one of these 0-0 fighters, and Jake Paul gets a win there.
You very well could. So I have yet to give my prediction as of yet, but I will do so right now. I am picking Jake Paul, round 9 TKO, very close fight throughout. Jake Paul is going to get dropped in round 3. He's going to survive that and eventually come back and win in the most heroic fashion you've ever seen and piss off the entire world. So there you go. I have to ask you this. Now that ESPN Plus and DAZN pay-per-view have joined forces, how do you think Dana White feels about having to promote this fight during UFC Nashville?
Hold on. I'm taking a listen. I just heard an explosion. I think Dana White's head turned into a tomato, and it got so red that it blew up.
Well, I
don't know. Does he actually know what's going on, or is he still over in Italy partying?
I have no idea. I think his Italy trip is over based on his Instagram story, but who knows? I haven't.
So in other words, the plane landed, and he's like, "Okay, what have I missed? What the?"
I actually do think, knowing like his personality from like what we know about his personality.
Yeah, he's gonna say, "I love it."
No. I'm gonna tell you what. There's no way he hasn't asked somebody to pull the deal, and they've said they've said no. Because remember, every single time he's been asked about it, he said that he refuses to talk about either Jake Paul or this fight itself. So, yeah.
Ultimately,
something tells me though that either someone's going to clue him in, or someone's going to force him to watch it, and he's going to be absolutely ecstatic if Nate Diaz somehow pulls off the win. So,
well, combine that with the fact that I talked about during part 2 of last episode with Dylan Rush, how there is that story out there where Nate is teasing. Once he has this fight with Jake Paul, maybe he goes back for another fight with the UFC.
Yeah, which I think the UFC is going to hope and pray that the fight that's waiting for Nate Diaz is Conor McGregor, but that's a story for another day, of course.
Well, that's what I said. That's what I told Dylan. I said, at this point, the only fight that makes sense for both guys, especially if whatever the hell's happening with this Conor Chandler fight right now, is, they're a match made for each other at this point.
Yeah, although it's happening like 7 years too late, but
right.
but yeah. Okay, so I'm picking Jake Paul. You're picking Nate Diaz. I just wanted to get your quick thoughts. What do you think of ESPN Plus and DAZN joining forces? I always thought that they couldn't stand each other. I was very surprised to see this partnership. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised to see the partnership. Also because I'm a little surprised in that, this was supposed to be a big test for DAZN in their pay-per-view model, and now they're joining up with ESPN Plus. It's a win for the fans, a win for, again, the availability of this, but you combine that with, Nate Diaz even has, I think, talked about how this fight wasn't built up as much as he thought it would be. So, in other words, it's a win for the fans. I think this is something kind of good, but it feels like it's proving that the DAZN pay-per-view model on its own is kind of a fail.
Yeah, so maybe this could be a thing where you'll see this more often with other DAZN-based fighters.
It might be, which kind of stinks considering, Zan, the vision that DAZN had about 4 years ago when they had boxing and they had Eddie Hearn and they had Bellator.
Yeah, something tells me if this is the way they're going to go, DAZN might only be worth it for Katie Taylor, Chantel Cameron, Amanda Serrano, and Clarissa Shields, and that's basically about it. That might be the only reason why you keep a DAZN subscription, at least if you're in the United States. Obviously, you can get other sports in other countries, but still very interesting. perspective there. So just to clue you guys in on that, pay-per-view starts at the same time as it normally would. You can purchase it on ESPN Plus or DAZN in the United States for the exact same price point of $59.99 there. So in case you guys didn't know, you have multiple options to choose from, and it is available globally everywhere else on DAZN. And it's actually $20 cheaper in Canada and nearly free in the United Kingdom. So for people who are in those countries, congratulations! You get a next to nothing fight to enjoy on a Saturday night / Sunday morning.
Which I would moan and complain, but you know what? I guess it makes up for the fact that next week it's the reverse, where the UK has to purchase and we get to watch free.
That's true. That's true. Very, 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 very good point. Thank you again for mentioning that. I guess if you want to watch Anthony Joshua, DAZN is still worth keeping.
Yeah, that's too. All right. Speaking of the Professional Fighters League, playoffs begin Friday, August 4th in good old San Antonio, Texas, the home of Shawn Michaels and the San Antonio Spurs. And that's all I can think of.
and also the home of Adrian Giannis too.
And Adrian Giannis, yes. And that's all I can think of. That's all that I can think of good that comes out of San Antonio. Let's go over the matchups quickly. So on the featherweight side, here's your bracket. It's Bubba Jenkins versus Jesus Pinedo and Gabriel Braga versus Chris Wade. Chris Wade did not originally make the playoffs. However, Movlid suffered an injury, and as a result, Wade gets to get another chance, basically, and gets to go into the semifinals against Braga. Jesus Pinedo, obviously, Zan, the big upset from PFL 4. He scores a first-round knockout of Brendan Loughnane, which originally eliminated Chris Wade as well as Loughnane.
You're gonna love this. I think the Jesus Pinedo train rolls into the finals, and I think he upsets Bubba Jenkins and knocks him out.
What? What? Oh my God! Why do you think he's upsetting Bubba Jenkins?
It's just the year of the madness of the PFL playoffs. It's gonna keep rolling.
I would flip if that happened. Not in a bad way. I'm just saying I would flip in shock if that happened. However, I think, Zan, this is Bubba Jenkins. Now that Movlid is out with injury, serious problem. This is Bubba Jenkins' best opportunity to claim a PFL championship. He's got a guy in there like hitting Jesus Pinedo, and again, no disrespect to him, but obviously when he beat Brendan Loughnane, it's still probably my pick so far, Zan, of biggest upset of this fight year thus far.
Oh, I think it is still for sure. Yeah.
And then you got Gabriel Braga and Chris Wade, who, if I'm not mistaken, Zan, I know Jenkins beat Chris Wade before. I don't know if he and Braga ever fought.
I can quickly look that up.
So I'm saying, based on experience when it comes to the finals, based on experience and all-around skill when it comes to the Pinedo fight, I just feel like this is Bubba Jenkins' best chance, and I really don't think that this can something Bubba Jenkins can let go. So I think Jesus Pinedo puts on a good showing. I think it could go to a decision, but I got to go with Bubba Jenkins.
Okay, just as a quick heads up, they've never fought number one and number two. If Jesus Pinedo doesn't somehow finish Bubba Jenkins, that will be the way the fight ends, which is your latter prediction, Bubba Jenkins by decision. If it does go the distance, I could see Bubba Jenkins controlling the fight a ton with top control time, but I do think if Pinedo stuffs the takedown, the fight gets super interesting, and I think Chris Wade versus Gabriel Braga is going to be an absolute slugfest. I think someone's going to get knocked out there. What do you think?
I could definitely see a slugfest between those two. I definitely think it'll be pretty brutal fight. I want to say Chris Wade because I would love to see another Bubba Jenkins Chris Wade fight, but I also think it's going to be Braga. I think Braga gives the biggest test to Jenkins in a final.
Given that you are the PFL website reporter, which fight out of these two are you most looking forward to covering, and why?
It's tough because I don't want to do the political kind of answer, but it's just my thought process of Braga versus Wade sounds like the more fun fight, but the story again for me is Bubba Jenkins in that this is the biggest opportunity he has. He's the top seed. Like it would be if he doesn't win this year, who knows when he wins?
Yeah, good point. Do you think in any way, shape, or form, if Chris Wade wins this tournament, could a UFC return come calling, or do you think he stays in the PFL?
I think it's possible the UFC could come calling.
Okay.
I think it's very possible. I wouldn't rule it out.
Are there any other fights on the card you're interested in?
Well, we still have the other semifinals we got to talk about. Light heavyweight bracket. You got Josh Silveira taking on Ty Flores, and you got Martin Hamlet taking on Impa Kasaganai. I actually got to talk Zain on the fan-sided MMA page a couple of weeks ago. I got to talk to Impa Kasaganai, and he has mentioned how much better his body feels and how much better just he feels overall at light heavyweight than he did when he was dropping to welterweight in the fight he had at middleweight.
Well, that's good to hear because he was on my unofficial Risings prospects list that I never ended up actually writing about. But I had a bit of a list going in my head a couple years ago, and he was definitely on there. So to see him in this position is very cool. And Hamlet's no slouch either. I know that the PFL doesn't do performance bonuses like the UFC, but you want to talk about an unofficial fight of the night contender. That's definitely one right there to circle, star, bookmark, whatever you have to do. That's a can't miss fight. Whether you're a casual MMA fan or a hardcore, Hamlet and Gonzaga are, regardless of promotion, two of the most exciting fighters that you'll see in the sport today. And then this other fight, I think Ty Flores has a chip on his shoulder. I mean, and this is without a doubt his toughest test of his career. And if he can win this fight, people may have not known who Ty Flores was before, but if he can beat Josh Silveira, I think a lot of people will know who he is after the fight. And I think you could see one of these two guys potentially graduate from the Professional Fighters League and move to that next level where they either are fighting in the merged promotion or one of these four could make it into the UFC. That's how high level these top two semifinal brackets look. What do you think of these other two fights?
Yes, so Silveira versus Flores. I mean, Silveira is just a beast, and I think he's an excellent grappler. Actually, of his 11-1 record, he hasn't been finished yet. 6 of his wins have come by submission. I feel like that, and he has actually described everything. It's hard grappling, hard pressure, and I think that's the kind of fight that he's going to give Ty Flores, and Ty Flores is going to have to be ready. I know Ty Flores has done some wrestling in his background, and ultimately, I think that's what the fight comes down to, which is actually similar to what you mentioned before, Zain, about Jenkins and Pinedo. Can Ty Flores stop the takedown offenses stop the takedown attempts by Josh Silveira, and can he control the action? If he can do that, he can pull off the upset. If not, I got to lean so far with Silveira, and I got to go with Silveira by decision for that fight.
My pick for the finals is Silveira versus Impa in New York City. What do you think?
I would love to see that. I would really love to see that. I was going to mention Hamlet versus Kasaganai. I mean, to me, that's your typical grappler versus striker fight. Impa Kasaganai is a great striker. Martin Hamlet, excellent grappling skills.
A wizard a wizard, no matter where the fight goes, but his ground game might be one of the most underrated in all of MMA, regardless of promotion.
Oh, you're talking about Hamlet.
Yeah.
His wrestling is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. Like, I as much as Kasaganai is a great striker, and I want to see him in the finals, I'm a little worried that Hamlet, as you mentioned, is too much of a wizard. I think I'm going to go Silveira Hamlet.
Okay. Well, regardless of how these matchups turn out, it's going to be madness either way because that's all the PFL has been this entire year. So
sure.
you're going to be in for a treat, sitting on your hands and toes, I'm sure, and that's going to be a thrill, and maybe it'll get you even more excited for the finals, considering that they're in their backyard in a couple of months. That'll definitely be very entertaining to pay attention to. So as I alluded to before at the beginning of the episode, be sure to follow Tom along on his journey as well as on the PFL website for all of your PFL goodies over there. You can catch the card on ESPN and ESPN Plus with the prelims exclusive to ESPN Plus. The PFL is officially back, so it's good to see, and it should be very entertaining.
For sure.
No question about it.
And we'll mention the PFL again in just a second, but just to finish off this coming weekend, we also do have Cory Sandhagen taking on Rob Font. Obviously, Sandhagen was originally booked to the face, was it Umar in the fight?
Yep, Umar Nurmagomedov. Yep.
Was Umar, yeah. So Umar Nurmagomedov and Cory Sandhagen were supposed to be the original main event. Umar was forced out of the bout a couple of weeks ago. In steps Rob Font because really he's one of the only ones available for this fight. And I mean, is this better or worse of an opportunity for Cory Sandhagen, Sam?
I mean, I think it's better because if you think about styles, between both of those guys, styles don't really change much. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Rob Font fan, huge fan of the New England Cartel and his fighting style, but I think him taking this fight on such short notice is going to come back to bite him. It's definitely great to see Rob Font, headlining another UFC fight night card, but this is Cory Sandhagen's fight to lose, and if he wants to stay in the bantamweight title picture, this is a absolute must win. And if Font wins, obviously it shakes up the division, of course, but to me, given how short notice this fight is, I don't see how Cory Sandhagen loses. I actually think he either wins by fourth round stoppage or unanimous decision.
Yeah, I think Font is tough enough to go the distance and survive Sandhagen's power, but I am going to go with Sandhagen by decision. And I agree with you 100%. I think for Sandhagen, this is, especially the fact that he's now fighting a guy on just a couple of weeks' notice, this is a must-win for him if he wants to, as you said, stay within the title picture, because obviously we've got Aljamain Sterling and Sean O'Malley coming up later this month for the Bantamweight Championship. But once that fight plays out, you got to imagine, Sam, that, if especially if Aljo wins, because his buddy ain't going to take a fight, that
Right.
Cory Sandhagen might be next in line.
So if you're a Merab fan, you're hoping that either A, Sandhagen wins, as well as praying to the MMA masses that somehow, someway, Sean O'Malley beats Aljamain Sterling, but doesn't do it in a controversial enough fashion to warrant an immediate rematch. Obviously, you have to put that caveat in there too. But the next few weeks are going to be mass chaos for the 135-pound division.
Absolutely. All right, let's quickly go over some news elements, and we have a little bit of a tease from one Donn Davis. So I should mention, last week, as part of the mega episode 47, I hosted one of the parts with Dylan Rush of Cage Side Press, and we had a whole discussion about a story that he broke just days earlier about the professional fighter. About Bellator and its potential future, of how Bellator is pushing for a Bellator 300, and basically saying that, hey, there are rumors, that basically the whole thing is with the PFL is inevitable. Here's the full tweet, by the way, from Donn Davis. Quote, "Our PFL team can focus 100% on building the company in the rare months like July when we don't have fight events. So August, look out for PFL big announcement that changes the global market of MMA." Now, then came the report from Dylan of Cage Side Press about Bellator 300, how they're pushing for it. But right now, he was going off of a report from, I think the Hit 'em Up Instagram account about
Stand him up.
Instagram account about how Bellator has no events after Bellator 299, and that's probably going to be it. Now, Todd Atkins, who we talked about Todd Atkins in this PFL story, how it's basically given him a little credibility. He is adding to the reports, so it seems to be more and more, even from somebody I talked to, Zan. It is inevitable that at some point this month, the announcement is going to come out. The Professional Fighters League will purchase Bellator. The question... Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to quickly chime in and say I'd like to publicly apologize to Mr. Todd Atkins because a couple of months ago on this very show, I essentially called his claims bullshit, and it is very much not bullshit, as we now know that more information is coming out to shout. So shout out to Todd Atkins for doing the digging and the extra reporting and making sure that this story was fully factual. So I had to give credit where credit was due.
Correct. And you know what? Given what he reported, and now Helwani even mentioned over the past couple of months about the possibility, Dylan now, and that tease by Donn Davis, at this point, it's inevitable. It's an inevitability that we're waiting for, that the PFL will purchase Bellator. The question, it seems to be, Zan, from everybody at this point is this going to be a merger, or is this going to be are they going to somehow find a way where, like UFC and Strikeforce originally, both promotions can still run?
Yeah, that's the big question. And something tells me with how bigger the PFL wants to get on a global scale, I think the merger is more likely than a split. And it's unfortunate given how much I've gotten more into Bellator over the last several years, how much I enjoy interacting with Scott Coker when I can. So I really do hope for his sake that there is still a place for him. I hope truly for his sake that he can stay in that promoter role because he's been doing it for so long. But
it's not just him. I mean, Sam, we've shouted out the Bellator PR team so much for what they've done for the both of us in our individual MMA careers and for this show. So, I hope for their sake, like I'm worried, like with a potential merger, all these fighters who could be out of jobs, all those behind the scenes people and PR who could be out of jobs, really hope that there is a place for them still in the sport if it goes to the merger.
Yeah, I hope so too. And if there is a place for them in the sport, I hope it's them joining forces with the PFL and keeping their jobs under the new merge promotion, whatever it's going to be called. But if it isn't, I mean, and I know we're kind of like saying it before the egg actually hatches. But if Bellator somehow does end with Bellator 299 in Dublin, Ireland, with Fabian Edwards as the headliner, I think we're gonna be. I think we're gonna have a sour taste in our mouth if that ends up being the case.
I already have a sour taste after the Bellator Rising cards. And it goes to what I talked about with Dylan, how basically we can't end on a 299. We need to end on something like a 300. We need to end on a card that has 3 or 4 title fights, like a Night of Champions of sorts, where you got Ryan Bader versus Linton Bissell, where you have maybe Johnny Evelyn fighting. Maybe I was going to say Patricio Pitbull, but those plans may have now gone up in smoke.
Yeah, no kidding. Or you could somehow have, I was gonna say too, even though he did lose his last fight, you could have Daniel James be one of the main attractions. You could have AJ McKee and or Sergio Pettis headlining the card. There's a lot of things you could do, but something tells me that if it doesn't end with 299, it's got to end with Bellator 300. It's got to end with a bang, and to me, it's got to end in their backyard in San Jose because that's where Bellator started, and that's where I think it needs to finish.
And Zan, I actually asked Dylan about that last week because I remember your suggestions on the part of the episode that you were on where he talked about his story, and we said, why not San Jose? Why not New York? Dylan did say there were 2 other cities that his source that he talked to said that were being consideration but weren't named. San Jose and New York City could be those two other locations.
Or one of those other locations could be a final extravaganza in Chicago too. So you never. Hey, it seems like they really enjoyed a relationship with Chicago based on what Scott Coker told me at the pre-fight press conference. So I'm not holding my breath that there's at least a 0.5% chance.
Hey, they seem to enjoy it more than the UFC does.
That's true. That's very true.
All right. Other headline that's actually, like I mentioned, a little bit of breaking news over the last 24 hours. Amanda Serrano is joining the PFL's pay-per-view Superfight division.
Yeah, I mean, this is outstanding news for the PFL and the pay-per-view Superfight division. Amanda Serrano is one of the best female boxers in the world. Obviously, just had her legendary fight with Katie Taylor about a year or so ago. You want to talk about the PFL making major acquisitions and major moves? You now have Francis Ngannou, former UFC heavyweight champion, one of the most popular combat sports stars on the planet. You have Kayla Harrison, the best 145er in the world. And you also have Jake Paul, who's, gone from a social media mogul to one of the most popular boxers in the world, whether people like it or not. I think the Superfight division is putting its money where its mouth is, and it's not a gimmick, and is trying to create the biggest and the best fights they can with fighters that aren't currently in the UFC. So this is going to add a lot of crossover intrigue. And again, for the second time on this show, I think after 6 months, I'm changing my opinion. I actually think if they make the right matchups, the Superfight division could work. It could be very successful and get people excited for PFL who haven't been before, and could also introduce new fans. So I think it's good for all parties involved.
And one thing also to add, Zain, is this isn't a Clarissa Shields situation where it's a fish out of water. Amanda Serrano has fights in mixed martial arts. Didn't she compete in Combate?
She did.
So she knows what it's like to be on a stage with national MMA attention. So this is definitely a good signing. And like you said, if they manage to pick the right fights and pick the right people up, this division could be successful. It's something to watch out for.
Yeah, so because you were asking me about it, Amanda Serrano is 2-0 in mixed martial arts. And yeah, she did compete in Combate Americas, her first two professional MMA fights. And her last MMA fight was against Valentina Garcia at Icon Fighting Federation 7 in June of 2021. She won just a minute into the first round by guillotine choke. So she does have MMA experience, a bit brief, but she has competed in MMA before. And her last appearance was in June of 2021. So it'll be nice to see her back in a familiar space. I failed to mention she does have one draw that was in her professional debut against Karina Herrera at Combate Americas, the first ever show that was put on by Campbell McLaren in April of 2018. It went to a unanimous draw, so probably a pretty close fight there. But yeah, she currently has 3 MMA fights. 2 of those were wins.
All right. Another thing to mention, Zain, as we kind of alluded to, 5 weeks out, still no main event for UFC 293. So when I originally recorded the episode with Dylan Rush, basically we were under the assumption that because of Dricus du Plessis' injury, because surprise, surprise, he managed to be banged up after fighting Robert Whittaker and wouldn't be ready for 9 weeks, like I said. So congratulations, UFC. But anyway, Sean Strickland looked like he was good. It would make logical sense, and I had said it that week I was with you, Zain, to be the next challenger. And then apparently on social media, on the site that's now called X, Sean Strickland basically alluded that apparently the UFC doesn't want the fight. So then what do you want? You want a rematch with Jared Cannonier?
That's what it's slowly but surely looking like. And I think, I don't know, because I don't have any inside information on this, but my guess or my conspiracy theory tells me that the UFC doesn't want this fight because They probably don't think the fight will sell as well as a DDP fight. That's number one. Probably something is going to get out of hand days before the fight that causes the fight to get canceled because Sean Strickland is crazy. And number three, the UFC doesn't want to see the same movie over and over again where Israel Adesanya goes in and wins a decision against someone that he could probably easily finish, but decides to hang back and chill because honestly, who could blame him? He's the best middleweight in the world.
That's exactly what you're going to get if we get Jared Cannonier again.
I don't know. I actually think Adesanya could viciously finish Cannonier if they fought.
I would hope there would be some sort of finish, but the first time they fought, it was a disappointment. Who's not to say that it's going to be a disappointment again?
Because Jared Cannonier has looked better than he's ever looked. That Marvin Vettori performance was world class.
Yes, I give him that kind of credit, but I don't know if he's on the level of Israel Adesanya.
He's not, but he'll do his best. That's for sure.
I just find it so crazy. Like, I get Dana had plans and it was his birthday and he went over to Italy and that's all fine, but you're weeks out from a card that has no main event and we need answers.
So, okay, I'm going to ask you this question and I'm going to put you on the spot. If you were a betting man and you could bet whether or not UFC 293 is going to be postponed, would you bet yes or no at this very moment in time?
I'm going to say no because the UFC will do everything in its power to, they don't like, Zain, Dana does not like to postpone and cancel cards.
Absolutely.
But you have an easier solution, Zain, which we've talked about. How about Fight Night Sydney and then Mexican Independence Day is UFC 293?
They could easily flip it. It wouldn't change the main event for Mexican Independence Day. It's still Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko 2. It's still a title fight. It's still a pay-per-view you could promote the heck out of.
And I was going to say, and I would totally get it if they tried the light heavyweight title fight that night. But you know what? Give Alexa, build on the Mexican Independence Day celebrations with an Alexa Grasso main event and finally giving Valentina Shevchenko her due and let her headline a pay-per-view. Because she's never headlined. She's only done co-headlines and fight night headlines. Like, she's never actually headlined a pay-per-view. Give her her one due.
That's true. You bring up a very good point. The lone Valentina Shevchenko fight that I saw in person was, in fact, a co-main event headlined by Cejudo and Moraes.
The Nunes fight was, but we've never seen Shevchenko at flyweight as a
no, and we've never seen Shevchenko as a champion in the red corner headline a UFC.
I mean, still wouldn't get that because Grasso's the champ,
right? Which is even more absurd. But so you think wholeheartedly though that UFC 293 will still happen in somehow, some way, and do you actually think it'll be Adesanya versus Cannonier?
I'm gonna say no. I'm still trying to push for Izzy versus Strickland. I think Zain, the UFC eventually is not going to have much of a choice.
Okay, so are we going to get an announcement at this time next week that the UFC 293 main event is signed, sealed, and delivered?
If we don't, I don't know what the UFC is doing.
I don't know either.
I know what they are doing with UFC 294, so we finally got an answer from Magomed Ankalaev and what the hell is next for him. It's Johnny Walker.
Yeah, this is not going to be an easy fight. You want to talk about a gatekeeper fight for Magomed Ankalaev? This screams gatekeeper, and you could very well see Johnny Walker ruin ruin every Magomed Ankalaev fans' plans for later this year, early next year, but have the UFC celebrate considering how disappointed they've been in him over the last year.
Because they're ridiculous. Just ridiculous. I like the fight. Don't get me wrong. I like the fight. Just ridiculous.
Are you picking Ankalaev?
Yes.
Are you picking him to finish Johnny Walker, or is he going to win by decision?
I'm going to go decision.
Okay, I'm going to say Ankalaev late third round TKO, very close.
That was
fight.
the other thing I was thinking of. That was the other thing I was thinking of. Third round TKO. I don't know. So the light heavyweight division's so cursed, Sam, that I just can't.
Well, if it's so cursed, watch the fight get canceled in a matter of about 12 days or so.
Probably. All right. We got 15 minutes left, Zan. So let's get into the big finish with all these recaps. So,
All right.
Terence Crawford is the new welterweight world champion, putting on a one-sided whooping of Errol Spence Jr. I cannot believe how one-sided this fight was. I mean, my jaw dropped when Crawford dropped him in the second round, and then it just continued twice. I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah. Full disclosure, this was the first pay-per-view that I had physically purchased in a very, very long time, and I'm glad I did. This fight lived up to the billing and more, in my opinion, although it was so one-sided. You want to talk about a virtuoso performance. You want to talk about the ease of the ring. You want to talk about the picture-perfect precision of the jab. Terence Crawford did everything and more, landed over 60% of his significant strikes that night against Spence, put him off balance, had him on his back foot the whole fight, had Spence hurt multiple times. It was just one of those fights where Terence Crawford called it 5 years ago, saying that Errol Spence didn't know what was coming to him, and 5 years later, Terence Crawford put on, again, like you were alluding to, the performance of a lifetime in what was thought to be a fight of the decade / fight of the year contender. It certainly wasn't fight of the year, but you want to talk about the best overall boxing performance of the year.
It's definitely up there.
It's not just up there. I'm going into this month of August that we're in right now. I am picking that as the best boxing performance overall that we have seen this entire year, and that doesn't discredit Gervonta Davis's win over Ryan Garcia, but this one was just you want to talk about this fight not being competitive. This fight was not competitive from the second the fight started until the second the fight was over.
It's absolutely shocking. What was also absolutely shocking, Zan, as we rapidly go through these, Justin Gaethje winning the BMF belt. It's not so much his win that was shocking. It's the matter of a second round head kick knockout. Like I said, 11 months, a little under a year to win in Salt Lake City last year. Leon Edwards pulled off the shocker of a lifetime when he scored the comeback knockout of Kamaru Usman. And Kamaru Usman was in the crowd, by the way, so he must have been getting some really bad flashbacks from that. But, I mean, Dustin Poirier was the last time Poirier was knocked out, San. You have to go back to when Michael Johnson knocked him out in 2016.
Oh, my goodness. That's even crazier to think about. Was your first reaction like mine was, oh, my goodness, it happened again in the same building? That was my first thought.
It came so out of nowhere that I was just like, what just happened? And then it sit in as the commentators were talking, like, oh my God, it happened again. So you know what that means, and that means every summer they're going to go to Salt Lake City, and it's going to be, and Salt Lake City is now going to be renamed Head Kick Knockout City.
No kidding. You want to talk about Justin Gaethje's nickname, the highlight. You want to talk about almost every single fight that he's been in for the last 5 years has been just absolute savagery, absolute wars. And this, to me, is worthy of making it on the Bob O'Reilly intro into every UFC pay-per-view moving forward. That's how unbelievably insane that head kick knockout was. It's without a doubt one of the best head kick knockouts I've ever seen. Shades of Mirko Cro Cop versus Gabriel Gonzalez. Except that Poirier's leg didn't go in an awkward direction.
Alex Pereira make a successful light heavyweight debut, getting the win over Jan Blachowicz in a fight that I thought was kind of disappointing, to be very honest with you.
Yeah, this fight wasn't great at all. I was expecting a lot more from these two, given what was on the line, and I thought Blachowicz's wrestling did enough for him to win. in the fight. I really don't think Pereira's striking really did all that much. He didn't really have Jan in too much trouble. I actually had an issue with the decision, and I thought the judges got it wrong. But quite frankly, I think it makes 205 a lot more interesting. The UFC's getting what they want. They're getting Pereira, with a potential title shot here next, and it makes Izzy versus Pereira 5 a lot more interesting. And quite frankly, I feel bad for Blachowicz, just considering that the year that he's had to sit through, given the mess that is the top of the division, and for him to come out and lose this fight is just absolutely devastating.
I mean, that's where I'm going to disagree with you about the decision. I had it for Pereira. I thought the first round, I agree with you, it was complete control by Blachowicz. The second round, in my opinion, however, I think Pereira, he did some damage on Blachowicz and could have gotten a finish if there was another minute to that round. So in that case, I had to go with Kotan. Regardless, I don't think either guy really proved too much in this fight. I mean, even if Jan had gotten the win, Zan, I don't think he has done enough to. I don't think either guy has convinced me enough, Zan, that Yuri Prohaska is not getting his title back. The title fight, the next title fight for the vacant title should be Yuri Prohaska versus Magomed Ankalaev. And I don't think at this point, it's just waiting the light heavyweight belt to go back to Yuri. And then eventually we get a Yuri versus Jamal Hill showdown.
So, assuming that Conor doesn't fight Chandler December 16th, is Yuri versus Magomed potentially going to be your December 16th main event?
No, it's going to be Yuri versus Alex because the UFC hates Magomed.
So you actually think the UFC is not going to go logically with the rankings, and they are going to give Pereira his title shot that he's been asking?
Yeah, it's the UFC.
Of course. Okay, so speaking of that, where does Jan Blachowicz go from here, in your opinion? Does he have to sit back and wait again?
That, or he's going to have to take a fight against an up-and-comer.
Which would be absolutely devastating considering where he was just 2 years ago.
I know. Derek Lewis, congratulations to him with a 33-second knockout, and then he became a member of D-Generation X, telling the whole crowd to go suck it.
Yeah. Again, another classic Derek Lewis performance. Poetic celebration that only he could make look so easy. One of the craziest knockouts I've ever seen, and I've been watching MMA for a long time. That's one that I'm going to have to replay over and over.
But that was also one that he needed. He was on a bad skid.
No, he was, and if the UFC doesn't re-sign him, I think Francis versus Derek Lewis holds itself. So if he does go to the PFL, sign me up for it. If he does not,
want that fight again?
Yeah, I'd watch that.
Not again. Zan, I'm gonna do it already.
Oh man.
Don't you remember?
I do.
I say even for this next fight.
Yes, this was just a factory of sadness the entire fight.
And the fact that the submission came in the final seconds of the fight. Like we couldn't even let him go to the bell. He had to get choked out at the end.
Yeah. If this was Tony Ferguson's last fight, this was a very sad way to go out. A 12-fight win streak turns into a 6-fight losing streak in 3 years.
He says he feels good and he has no plans to retire. And I don't know if the UFC is, it wants to convince him out of it. Zan, they have not learned from BJ Penn. He is going to tie BJ Penn's losing streak record.
Yeah, it's slowly but surely looking that way. And it's like another downfall, very similar to Chuck Liddell. It's very, very disappointing. Yeah. And you would think, and you and I know this well, 5 years ago, Tony Ferguson beats Bobby Green in 10 minutes, not in 2023.
Not at all. And I don't know if Tony Ferguson is ever going to win a fight again. So he may as well he needs to hang it up for his own health and his own sake. He needs to hang it up. But
Agreed.
I guess this is why he's the crazy guy in the UFC.
Although to give him credit, he did look okay in the early part of the first round, though.
Yeah, but I just can't take it for his own health. I just can't take this because then how is he going to act if the next fight, which ties the BJ Penn losing record, what happens if he gets brutally knocked out again?
Yeah, that would be devastating. We don't want to see that.
Also, shout out to Kevin Holland. Bravo choking under 3 minutes. Like I said, I like Chiesa, and he even Holland said it. But at this point, just stick to the commentary booth.
Yeah, I think Chiesa needs to stick to commentary. He and as far as we know, he did not retire in the octagon, but him taking the gloves off was a sign to me that he might be done.
It was for me too. Overall, I'm gonna give this card. It's either an A- or a B+. I can't go full A. I feel like it's like what I talked about with the fight hype last week, Zan. The Ferguson fight brings it down for me.
Yeah, I would say this is an A- card, and one that I think a lot of people are going to remember. And I actually think it was better than UFC 290, and it might have actually been the best card of the summer.
Really, because of the finishes?
Yeah.
Like I said, I think I still lean to 290 because all the fights were exciting. I think that's the big thing that comes out of 291 for me is the head kick, and there's just no reason to keep bringing Tony Ferguson out.
Well said, for sure. But overall, very successful weekend on the MMA front, and UFC 291 over-delivered and more. And if you missed it, definitely go back and check it out because there were some epic finishes on that card, both on the main card and on the prelims. So,
and now, Zan, to close things out in overtime, I'm going to bring us down because we're going to talk about a bad card quickly.
Bellator, this was bad. This is when you and I were both asleep, and it looked like we didn't really miss much.
So for those who missed it, between our last episode now, AJ McKee ended up withdrawing because of injury. So Patricky Pitbull instead gets Roberto de Souza, and it was pretty easy for Pitbull. And Patricky Pitbull now gets to advance to the semifinals. And I don't know, McKee being out of it kind of took the wind out of the sails of this a little bit. If Pitbull had finished McKee, I wouldn't say so much, but the fact that Roberto de Souza was in the tournament all of a sudden, it's disappointing.
And then with Patricio Pitbull losing in Ryzen, that's even more devastating too.
Okay, since you mentioned it, yeah, I think that's the bigger story over that one and over the other one I'm going to get to. Patricio Pitbull gets put in a late notice fight with Chihiro Suzuki to make up for the fact that that fight and Archuleta's original opponent fell out. Archuleta did win the Ryzen Bantamweight title, so good on him, but for your golden boy to just get knocked out in the first round in this kind of fashion.
Yeah, literally weeks after he had competed at Bellator 297, which is even more devastating.
Yeah, ultimately, Zan, should he have been in there on such short notice?
No. But hey, good for Suzuki. It definitely makes him a global superstar, and it's one of those knockouts that leaves you going, holy shit. So
and then Zan, to add insult to injury, we have no inaugural flyweight champion. Horiguchi Takahashi ends in 25 seconds. Eye poke, no contest.
Yeah, so that means you think we're gonna get the rematch New Year's Eve? What do you think?
It won't be for the Bellator flyweight title if the PFL purchased them.
No, I know. I was just saying if we were going to do a straight rise and rules fight, could you see it happen December 31st?
Probably. I could probably see it.
Okay. And I would still pick Horiguchi if they fought again, just as an FYI.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what fight did we get? We got 25 seconds. We didn't really get a fight here.
No, we didn't. We got a fight that could fit a small YouTube short is what happened.
Maybe I should talk to Nick to see if we can get that fight up on our YouTube shorts.
Oh, I think it would. I think it would still explode even a couple days later.
All right. That's going to do it for this edition of the MMA Outsiders. One more time, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network, including every episode of the MMA Outsiders, every Tough Enough live stream that I do. We got 2 shows of Tough left, and then the finale takes place as part of UFC 292.
Yeah, and I will be back to preview the finale, so stay tuned for that once we know what the finale looks like. So
for sure. Some scheduling. Obviously, we don't normally record on record on Wednesday and air on Thursday, but this is probably what it's going to be for August, and then September we will try to go back to our normal time slot.
yeah, so thank you again for bearing with us on that front. And even though it is a lighter week in the combat sports space, enjoy the fights, and we will be back next week where hopefully we'll have some pretty good fights to talk about, and we'll also give our takeaways from what we thought of episode 1 of Dana White's Contender Series, which I'm very excited about.
So that's Zain Bando. You can find his work over at bjpen.com, and he's a Bellator Rankings Committee member. You can follow him at Zambando99. I'm Tom Albano. Find my work over at Fansided MMA. I'll be with live coverage on their website for the PFL Playoffs beginning this week with the San Antonio card. And you can follow me on X at Thomas J. Albano. That's right. It's now X.
Yeah, and just to correct myself, I should have said it too. Yes, you can also follow me on X at Sandhagen99, as well as all my other social media platforms too. So I'm pretty easy to find, regardless of what social media apps are called these days. Quite frankly, there's probably going to be a new one in the next few days that we won't know about. That's going to somehow take over the world.
I'm going to create a new social media app called Bleck.
What is that?
I don't know. It's just another social media site because everything is the same these days. It's also Bleck. So BLECH.
Okay, right. Well, have a good one. Have a good one, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you all next week.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.